What would you do if the very proof of your identity, your passport, was set on fire in front of hundreds of strangers? What if the person who did it wasn't a criminal in the shadows, but a flight attendant in uniform, smiling as the ashes curled into smoke? On Flight 729, Dr. Selena Ward, a calm and accomplished black woman, found herself at the center of a nightmare no traveler should face. Humiliated, accused, and ordered to kneel like she was less than human. She watched her passport dissolve into flames, while passengers live-streamed in shock. But here's the twist. No one expected. Selena wasn't just another passenger. She was the chief inspector of the Federal Aviation Administration, carrying authority that could shake the entire industry. What happened in the minutes after that fire didn't just decide her fate. It changed aviation forever. How does a woman transform humiliation into justice? How does ash become the evidence that sparks reform? Stay with us, because this story will challenge your heart, your conscience, and maybe even the way you look at airports forever. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories. The cabin lights glowed a soft amber as passengers settled into their seats aboard Aurora Atlantic Flight 672 bound from San Francisco to New York. The plane was sleek, new, its walls humming with the faint vibration of power as the last of the carry-ons were stuffed into overhead bins. The scent of recirculated air mixed with the faint tang of disinfectant, familiar to anyone who traveled often. For Dr. Selena Ward, the sound and smell were routine, comforting even, after years of boarding flights across the world. She eased into seat 20, first-class window, and let her leather satchel rest across her lap. She brushed a hand over the cool fabric of the seat, watching ground crew lights blink outside. Her boarding stub was tucked neatly into her passport sleeve, her bag carefully zipped, her phone silenced, every detail in its place. That was how she lived: orderly, precise, professional. But beneath the surface of her calm exterior, her chest carried the subtle weight of a truth only she knew. She wasn't just another passenger. She was Chief Inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration's Civil Aviation Enforcement Division. Her job was to move quietly, observe, and test the systems designed to protect passengers. Most people never noticed her presence. That was the point. The aisle bustled with final passengers when the sharp click of polished heels announced the approach of Vivian Cross, the lead flight attendant. Her uniform was immaculate, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that gave her face a severity as if carved from stone. Vivian's eyes scanned the cabin with the coolness of someone who believed herself in control of everything she saw. Her gaze landed on Selena. "Excuse me," Vivian said. Her voice clipped, sharp enough to cut glass. "I'll need to see your boarding pass again." Selena looked up, surprised. "Of course," she said, keeping her tone even. She reached into her satchel, pulled out the stub, and placed it gently into Vivian's hand. Vivian's lips tightened. She studied the slip, then flipped it back and forth as if it might reveal a secret hidden in the paper fibers. "This says 2A," she said, "but 2A is reserved for confirmed passengers." Selena tilted her head. "And I am a confirmed passenger." A faint murmur drifted across the first-class cabin. Two men in business suits paused mid-conversation. A young woman a few rows back, phone already in hand, leaned slightly into the aisle. Vivian's expression hardened. "I'll need to see identification. Passport. Driver's license, whatever you're carrying." Selena felt a flicker of heat stir in her chest. She had flown enough to know this wasn't standard procedure. "Is there a problem?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Vivian replied. "You." the words carried like a spark in dry air. A couple of passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others watched more intently, sensing drama where there should have been only calm. Selina inhaled slowly, pressing back the rising wave of frustration. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Never let rage steal your dignity. She reached for her passport and handed it over. Vivian accepted it with the air of a gatekeeper catching a trespasser. She flipped it open, examined the cover, then smirked as if she had found exactly what she was looking for. "This doesn't feel right," Vivian muttered, her tone louder now, crafted for an audience. "The texture's off. The seal looks cheap. Where did you even get this?" Selina felt the blood drain from her face, though she forced her features to remain calm. Around her, whispers stirred. A man coughed uncomfortably. Someone else muttered, "What's happening?" "You're accusing me of carrying fake documents?" Selina asked, her voice steady but carrying the kind of quiet weight that demanded an answer. Vivian raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "I don't accuse, I verify. And this," she shook the passport slightly, "doesn't look verifiable." Selina's pulse beat heavy in her ears. Part of her wanted to stand, to reveal her badge, to end the charade before it began. But another part colder, more strategic, told her to wait. Wait. Watch. Document. Sometimes the truth revealed itself best when people showed who they really were. A passenger across the aisle, Lorraine Pierce, a woman draped in designer silk with pearls around her neck, leaned forward eagerly. "Good catch," she said to Vivian. "We can't have imposters in first class." The words stung, but Selina kept her breathing even. She folded her hands neatly in her lap, spine straight, eyes locked on Vivian with quiet composure. Vivian smirked at Lorraine, emboldened. "Don't worry, ma'am. We won't." A phone camera clicked. Another began recording video. A young college student in the last row of first class. Amaya Torres had already begun streaming to her social media followers. The glowing red dot on her phone lens blinked like a warning flare. Vivian noticed the cameras, but ignored them, her gaze still fixed on Selina. She held the passport aloft like evidence in a trial. "I think we'll let security sort this out." Selina's jaw tightened. Here it is, she thought. The moment where silence either protects my dignity or betrays it. Inside. Her heart twisted. Memories of past indignities flickered, times she had been mistaken for less than what she was. Times she had been spoken down to, dismissed, ignored. Each one had left a scar invisible to the eye, but carved deep in her spirit. And here it was again, replaying in the most public of stages. 37,000 feet in the air. A cabin full of strangers. Phones recording every breath. But Selina Ward was not a woman who broke easily. She leaned back in her seat, eyes calm, posture regal despite the sting of humiliation. She said only one thing, her voice as soft as velvet, yet heavy with meaning. "You're making a mistake." Passengers stirred again. Some nodded in agreement, others exchanged skeptical glances. Amaya's livestream comments began flooding. "She looks so calm. This feels wrong." "What's the FAA doing?" Vivian scoffed, closing the passport with a snap. "Mistakes are made by criminals, not by crew trained to spot them." She handed the passport to Marla Jensen, the supervisor just entering the cabin. Marla scanned it briefly, then looked at Selina with narrowed eyes. "Seat 2A will need to be reassigned until this can be verified," Marla announced, her voice carrying over the hum of the engines. A hush fell over the cabin. The tension was a living thing now, sharp and unbearable, the air too thick to breathe. Selena lowered her gaze to the floor, not in defeat, but in thought. A war raged inside her chest. Comply and let them strip her dignity, or resist and risk escalation before revealing who she truly was. Her fingers brushed the edge of her satchel. Inside, just beneath the surface, rested the badge that could change everything. But not yet. The hum of the engines deepened as boarding completed, but inside the cabin of Aurora Atlantic Flight 672, silence pressed heavy. Every eye seemed to be watching the quiet standoff in first class. Dr. Selena Ward sat in seat 2A, her posture composed, though her insides churned like a storm-tossed sea. Marla Jensen, the supervisor, still held her passport in her hand. Vivian Cross stood close by, smirking as though she had already won. Lorraine Pierce leaned forward in her seat, pearls gleaming, her lips curved in a satisfied smile. Amaya Torres's phone streamed steadily from the back row, capturing every gesture, every glance, every word. Comments scrolled in waves, tens of thousands of strangers debating the worth of a woman they had never met, deciding her dignity in real time. Selena inhaled slowly, letting her breath settle in her chest. She had spent years preparing herself for moments exactly like this. She was a black woman in spaces not designed for her comfort. She was an inspector in an industry too often blind to its own biases. She was a human being whose worth had been measured and doubted more times than she could count. And now, as passengers stared, as whispers coiled around her like smoke, she felt the familiar burn of humiliation. Her thoughts pressed against her ribs. Should she speak? Should she reveal her badge and end this farce? No, not yet. Timing was everything. She had learned that from her mother, who taught her that dignity was often less about what you shouted and more about what you held back. Marla finally spoke, her voice sharp, official. Dr. Ward, until your identification can be verified, you'll need to step aside. Security will meet you at the gate. The word security rippled through the cabin like a jolt. A man in a nearby seat muttered, "Ridiculous." A younger woman frowned and whispered to her partner, "She's literally just sitting there." Others nodded approvingly, convinced that the crew was right to be cautious. Selena lifted her gaze to Marla, her voice level, precise. "My documents are valid. You are mistaken." Vivian scoffed. "That's what they all say." The word stung, but Selena let them fall away. Her heart raced beneath her calm exterior, but she refused to let it show. She adjusted her satchel on her lap, the faint metallic glint of the badge chain hidden just beneath the zipper. Then it happened. Vivian held up the passport for all to see. With a flick of her lighter, the tiny flame danced dangerously close to the edge of the burgundy cover. Gas rippled across the cabin. "Stop," Selena said quietly, her voice carrying more weight than any shout. "That is a federal document." But Vivian's grin widened. "Fake documents burn fastest," she said, and she touched flame to paper. The corner of the passport curled black. The gold lettering of the United States began to bubble. Smoke twisted upward into the recycled air. Passengers cried out in disbelief. Someone shouted, "She's burning it!" Selena's breath caught in her chest. For one suspended moment, it felt as though her entire identity were dissolving before her eyes. Years of travel, every visa stamp, every crossing, every proof of her existence, reduced to ash in the hands of someone who saw her as nothing but a fraud. Amaya's live-stream viewers spiked into the hundreds of thousands. Comments flew across her screen. "Is this real? She's actually burning it. Call the FAA right now. This is insane." Selena wanted to move, to snatch it back, But she remained rooted, her composure unbroken. If she reacted with rage, the narrative would turn against her. She knew the trap. A black woman angry would be seen as a threat. A black woman calm would be underestimated. But underestimated power was power waiting for its moment. Vivian dropped the smoldering passport into a metal waste bag. "Problem solved," she announced, brushing her hands together with satisfaction. Selena's voice was soft but unwavering. "You've just committed a federal crime." The words landed like stones in water, rippling outward. Murmurs swelled. Darius a businessman across the aisle, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "She's right," he said. "That's not how this works. You can't just burn someone's passport." But Marla waved him off. "We're handling this, sir. Please remain seated." Selena bent slowly to retrieve her boarding stub from the floor where Vivian had swiped it earlier. Shoe prints smudged the paper, but the subtle federal priority stamp still glinted in the corner. She held it between her fingers, not raising it high, but letting the nearby passengers see. A man 2 rows back gasped softly. "That's a priority clearance." Vivian sneered. "Fake, just like the passport." Selena's chest tightened, but she did not argue. She let the silence speak for her. Around her, witnesses began recording more openly. Amaya whispered into her phone, narrating for her swelling audience. "They just burned this woman's passport in front of everyone. She hasn't raised her voice once. She looks so calm. This is insane." Selena closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself against the roar in her head. "What if they don't believe me? What if this escalates for the briefest moment?" Doubt clawed at her resolve. She thought of her younger sister, who had once been detained at an airport for hours simply because her braid set off a scanner. She thought of her father, whose military uniform had not protected him from suspicion in his own country. She thought of herself, sworn to uphold justice, yet standing on the edge of being stripped of it by people who believed her unworthy. When she opened her eyes again, the fire inside her was clear. "Supervisor Jensen," she said, addressing Marla with quiet authority, "you are detaining me without cause. You have destroyed legal identification. I am requesting immediate documentation of this incident." Marla's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to make requests. Criminal suspects don't have that right." The words chilled the cabin. Darius shook his head in disbelief, whispering, "This isn't right. This isn't how the law works." At that moment, Captain Ethan Cole entered the cabin. His uniform carried weight, the kind that silenced murmurs with its mere presence. He looked from Vivian to Marla to Selena. His brow furrowed as he took in the smoldering waste bag. "What's happening here?" he demanded. Vivian straightened instantly. Passenger attempted to board with fraudulent documents. "Captain, we disposed of them." "Disposed?" he repeated, his voice edged with disbelief. He glanced at Selena, noting her steady posture, her composed eyes. "You burned them?" "Yes," Vivian replied proudly. "Obvious fakes. You can tell by how fast they caught flame." Selena finally spoke, her tone precise, cool. "All documents burn when exposed to fire. Captain, that is chemistry, not guilt." A hush fell again. Even Ethan seemed struck by the clarity of her words. The plane had become a theater, every passenger an unwilling audience, every action judged not just here in this cabin, but across the digital world, where Amaya's stream climbed toward 500,000 viewers. Selena knew the weight of this stage. Every second mattered. Her phone buzzed in her satchel again, vibrating insistently against the fabric. She glimpsed the caller ID flashing across the screen. Federal Operations Command. Urgent. She let it buzz, her hand resting on the satchel but not answering. Revealing it now would end the show too soon. Timing mattered. Vivian turned toward the passengers, playing to her crowd. This is why we're trained. Criminals hide in plain sight. They act calm because they think it makes them believable. But to those watching, her words no longer rang with authority. The sight of ash rising from the waste bag, the quiet dignity of the woman accused, the smugness of the accuser, it all told a different story. Selina leaned forward slightly, her voice low but clear enough for those nearby to hear. You will regret this choice. Vivian froze for just a fraction of a second. She masked it with a scoff, but the doubt had flickered. Marla shifted uneasily. Captain Cole studied Selina more intently, his instincts catching on the edges of something more than what he had been told. The storm was only beginning. Selina sat back, her eyes steady, her heart iron. Inside, she whispered to herself the same words she had held onto since childhood. Patience is power. Let them show the world who they are, then show them who you are. The air inside the cabin thickened, not only from the faint curl of smoke wafting out of the metal waste bag, but from the tension that pressed on everyone's chest like an invisible hand. Conversations broke into fragments, passengers murmuring, some outraged, others nodding approval as if order had been preserved. Yet the truth felt undeniable. The room itself had tilted towards something ugly and irreversible. Selina Ward sat unmoving in her seat, eyes fixed on the faint stream of smoke curling up from what was once her passport. The smell of burned paper clung stubbornly to the recycled air, her lungs filled with it, acrid and bitter, each breath reminding her of the identity that had been destroyed in plain view. Still she kept her shoulders level, her face serene. Amaya Torres whispered into her phone from across the cabin. Her voice trembled with disbelief, narrating for the hundreds of thousands now watching her live stream. They burned it. I swear, the flight attendant lit it on fire. And this woman, she hasn't even raised her voice once. I don't know how she's staying so calm. Vivian Cross preened beside the waste bag, her smirk sharp as glass. Problem handled, she announced, as though speaking for the entire crew. Passengers can feel safe now. Safe. Selina tasted the word like iron. Safe had been turned into a weapon, a justification for humiliation. Her phone buzzed again in her satchel. The vibration hummed insistently, rattling against the zipper. She didn't reach for it. Timing still mattered. Captain Ethan Cole stood close, one hand resting on the back of an empty seat, his expression unreadable. He glanced between Vivian and Selina, his training urging him toward order, his instincts telling him something else was unfolding here. Smoke in the cabin, a smoldering document, an accused passenger who spoke with precise calm. Nothing fit the narrative he had been handed. Supervisor Marla Jensen's voice broke the silence. Security will meet us at the gate. Until then, Dr. Ward remained seated under observation. A woman 2 rows back muttered loudly enough for others to hear. Good. These scammers are getting bold. Selina turned her head slightly, catching the woman's eyes. There was no anger in her gaze, only a depth that unsettled. The woman looked away almost instantly, adjusting her necklace as though it were suddenly too tight. Darius the businessman across the aisle, leaned forward. His tone was low but firm. You're making a mistake, he said to Marla. I've seen real passports. That was no fake. And even if it were, burning, it isn't procedure. Marla shot him a tight smile. Sir, please stay in your seat. We're handling the matter. Darius leaned back, shaking his head. Under his breath, he whispered, You're not handling it. You're escalating it. Selina folded her hands in her lap, the faint glimmer of the badge chain slipping into partial view. She noticed it, adjusted the bag slightly, and wondered if anyone else had caught the flash of gold. She did not yet want them to. Her mind wrestled with itself, a storm behind her steady expression. How far do I let this go? How much humiliation must I endure before stepping in? She thought of her oath, the weight of her federal commission. She was not only a woman sitting in first class with her dignity on trial, she was an investigator tasked with rooting out exactly this kind of abuse. To intervene too soon would rob the moment of its full revelation. To wait too long risked harm she could not allow. The smoke drifted higher, and with it came coughs from a few passengers. A flight attendant from economy rushed forward with a small extinguisher, alarm clear in her eyes. Vivian intercepted her. It's under control. She snapped, just document disposal. The younger attendant hesitated, looking from the faint flames to Selina, to the recording phones pointed in every direction. Her lips parted as though she wanted to say more, but she stepped back, silenced by the authority of her senior. Selina's phone buzzed again, louder this time, its ringtone distinct and unusual. A few passengers turned their heads. A man in military fatigues narrowed his eyes. That sounds like a government line, he said softly. Vivian pounced before anyone could process the words. Criminals steal government phones too. Part of the scam. The soldier frowned, unconvinced. Amaya's livestream scrolled with comments faster than her eyes could track. That was a secure line ringtone. She's not who they think she is. Holy hell, this is going viral. Selina steadied herself. The humiliation was deep, but so was her resolve. She whispered inwardly, Endure. Let them trap themselves in their own arrogance. When the moment comes, the truth will be undeniable. Captain Cole bent slightly toward Marla, his voice pitched low but audible to Selina. Why burn it? It doesn't follow any protocol, I know. Marla stiffened. It was a judgment call. Vivian has 15 years of experience spotting fakes. Experience doesn't change chemistry, Selina interjected quietly. Her words were like glass sliding across stone, clear and cutting. All paper burns, authentic or fake. A ripple moved through the cabin. Passengers looked at her anew, catching the steel in her calm. Captain Cole's gaze lingered, troubled. Lorraine Pierce, the pearl-draped passenger, leaned forward again, her voice sharp. Captain, we all want to get to our destination safely. Don't let her games delay us. Selina turned to her, and for the first time, a faint edge entered her voice. The only game being played is the one where truth is set on fire. Lorraine flushed, sputtering, then fell silent. Her phone vibrated once more, the screen lighting with the words Federal Response Team, urgent. Selina's hand hovered above the satchel, the weight of choice pressing down on her. She could reveal herself now, end the charade, strip Vivian and Marla of their false power. But she waited, watching the way the cabin fractured into two halves, those who believed the worst of her without question, and those who saw dignity and composure as evidence of truth. Amaya whispered again into her phone. She's just sitting there, calm, like she knows something no one else does. I think we're about to see something huge. Selina closed her eyes for a brief moment, drawing breath into her lungs, letting it settle the storm within her. She could feel the tide turning. Not yet, but soon. The boarding clock ticked down on the cabin screen, 26 minutes remaining. Captain Cole stepped back, his unease plain. Smoke continued to drift from the waste bag, curling toward the vents. Security had not yet arrived. though their presence was promised. The passengers shifted, restless, caught between spectacle and outrage. And in the center of it all sat Dr. Selina Ward. Her identity burned, but her resolve unscathed, waiting for the precise second when truth would blaze brighter than any flame Vivian Cross could conjure. The sound of heavy shoes echoed down the narrow aisle. 2 uniformed security officers entered the cabin, their presence instantly shifting the mood. Passengers leaned into the aisle to capture the moment on their phones, as if the truth would only exist if recorded. The officers scanned the cabin, their eyes quickly landing on the small plume of smoke still drifting from the waste bag and the woman seated calmly with her hands folded in her lap. "That's her," Vivian Cross announced before anyone else could speak. Her voice cut through the air with certainty, practiced authority. She attempted to board with fraudulent documents. I disposed of the fake passport for safety. Officer Raymond Holt, tall and broad-shouldered, approached first. He glanced into the waste bag, then at Selina Ward. He frowned, confusion briefly flashing across his face. Burned. Why is it burned? Vivian didn't hesitate. Counterfeit materials go up like tissue. I protected the passengers from being scammed. Selina kept her voice level. Federal passports burn when exposed to flame. That fact does not make them counterfeit. It makes them paper. The officer shifted uncomfortably. His training had not prepared him for a flight attendant torching documents at 37,000 feet. He looked back at his partner, Officer Linda Zhao, who was already writing notes. Supervisor Marla Jensen interjected quickly, seizing control of the narrative. "Captain, we request this passenger be detained until the plane can be safely returned to the gate. Fraudulent documents are a serious breach." Captain Ethan Cole rubbed a hand over his jaw. His gut screamed that something was wrong, but his uniform required neutrality. He turned to Selina. "Ma'am, do you have any other form of identification?" Selina paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough for tension to thicken. Then she answered quietly, "Yes, but I will present it at the appropriate time." The words unsettled Vivian, her smirk flickering. "See, she's stalling. Criminals always think they can talk their way out." The cabin buzzed with whispered debates. Some passengers muttered agreement, convinced fraud had been caught. Others, especially the younger ones watching Amaya Torres's live stream, shook their heads in disbelief. The comment feed flashed across Amaya's screen so quickly she could barely read it. Why would a scammer sit so calmly? She talks like a lawyer. This is bigger than they think. Darius Ung cleared his throat. "Officers, with respect, I've traveled internationally for 30 years. That looked like a real passport to me." "The burning sir," Vivian snapped. "Please stay out of official proceedings." "No," Darius said firmly, his voice carrying. "I will not stay out when I saw a passenger's identity destroyed without due process. That is not procedure." Several heads nodded. Amaya caught it on camera, whispering, "Finally, someone's backing her up." Selina sat unmoving, though her pulse beat hard beneath her calm exterior. Inside, her thoughts waged war. Should I reveal it now? Should I cut this performance short, or should I let them bury themselves deeper in arrogance? Her fingers brushed the edge of the leather credential wallet inside her bag. The weight of it felt like a live ember, waiting for release. Vivian noticed the slight movement. "She's hiding something," she announced triumphantly, pointing at the satchel. "Probably more fakes. Officers, search it now." Officer Holt hesitated. "Ma'am, can I ask what's in the bag?" Selina raised her eyes to his. Steady and unflinching. Personal identification. See, Vivian crowed. Another fake. But Holt's expression shifted. Something in Selena's tone, in the precise diction, struck him as different. This wasn't the flustered chatter of a caught fraudster. It was the calm certainty of someone who knew the law better than anyone else in the room. Still, protocol bound him. "Ma'am, I need to see what's inside the bag." Selena's heart thudded once, then steadied. She nodded. "At the appropriate time," she repeated softly. The boarding clock ticked down, 22 minutes remaining. The air felt thicker now, every breath heavy with smoke and tension. Amaya whispered into her phone again. "She's holding back. She knows something. I can feel it. This is going to blow up." Passengers shifted in their seats, restless. A woman coughed, fanning away smoke. The younger flight attendant from economy returned with a fire blanket, only to be waved off again by Vivian. Handled, Vivian insisted. But Captain Cole wasn't convinced. He stepped toward the waste bag, leaned in, and saw the charred fragments. A piece of the federal seal shimmered faintly beneath ash, unmistakable even in partial ruin. His stomach dropped. He knew what he was looking at. That wasn't a fake. That was real. He straightened slowly, his voice tight. "Vivian, explain to me again why you burned it." Vivian's face stiffened. "Because it was fake. Because I know what I'm doing." Cole's eyes met Selena's. For the first time, doubt turned into something else. A dawning realization that the woman sitting silently might hold more power than anyone had considered. Selena's phone vibrated again, its tone piercing, unmistakably official. Several passengers gasped. The soldier spoke louder this time. "That's not just a government line. That's federal priority." Vivian barked a laugh, brittle and desperate. "Criminals can fake ringtones, too." Selena finally spoke, her voice low but carrying across the hushed cabin. "Ignorance of the law is not a defense." The words hung there, chilling. Vivian's confidence cracked, though she tried to mask it with another smirk. Amaya's livestream chat exploded. "She just quoted the law. Who is she? I swear she's undercover." Officer Zhao stepped closer. She had been quiet until now, observing. "Ma'am," she said respectfully, "do you work for the government?" Selena met her eyes, letting the silence hold just long enough to build weight. Then she answered with precision. "Yes." A now gasp rippled through the cabin. Vivian's face blanched. Marla Jensen's lips parted as if to object, but no sound came. Captain Cole's shoulders squared, the final pieces aligning in his mind. Selena's bag shifted as she adjusted it deliberately. The chain caught the cabin light, glinting unmistakably gold. Murmurs swelled, passengers leaning forward. Amaya zoomed her phone camera closer. Is that a badge?" someone whispered. Selena breathed once, deep and steady. She could feel the circle tightening, every eye on her, every camera capturing each flicker of light. The humiliation had burned, but now it was transforming into something else. The moment was arriving. She closed her fingers over the credential wallet. The weight of justice was in her hands, and when she revealed it, nothing would ever be the same for Vivian Cross, Marla Jensen, or the airline that had allowed this moment to happen. The boarding clock ticked down again, 18 minutes remaining. The hum of the aircraft's engine seemed louder now, vibrating through the tense silence of the cabin. Every passenger was watching. Every phone was raised. The smoke from the burned passport had thinned into a faint haze, but the smell lingered, sharp and acrid, like a scar etched into the air itself. Selena Ward sat very still. her hands folded neatly on her lap. On the surface, she appeared calm, but her chest was tight. Her mind ran through the consequences. If she pulled the badge too soon, the lesson might be lost. If she waited too long, the situation could spiral out of control. She had been in dozens of tense operations, undercover checks, even moments when her own safety had been threatened. But this one was different. She was not just protecting herself. She was holding a mirror up to an entire system, and every second was being recorded by 500,000 strangers. Vivian Cross leaned closer to the officers, her words dripping with urgency. "She's stalling. That's what fraudsters do. Look at how composed she is. Classic behavior. She's trained to manipulate." Her voice carried the false confidence of someone who had been believed too many times before. Supervisor Marla Jensen nodded along, though her eyes betrayed the first flicker of doubt. Captain Ethan Cole stayed near the waste bag, arms crossed, his gaze locked on Selena. He was trained to read people in crisis, and something about Selena's poise unsettled him. This was not the body language of a con artist. Selena's phone buzzed again, that same shrill federal tone that sliced through the cabin noise. This time the sound made more passengers whisper aloud. The soldier who had spoken earlier leaned across the aisle. "Sir," he said to Officer Holt, "that tone belongs to Federal Priority Devices. I've heard it in command centers. You don't just fake that." Holt's brow furrowed. His instincts were clashing with the story Vivian fed him. He looked at Selena with growing respect. "Ma'am, can you explain the calls you've been receiving?" Selena tilted her head, her voice measured. "Those calls are exactly what they sound like. But you'll see soon enough." Vivian barked a laugh, though it rang hollow. "She's bluffing. Criminals can fake anything, documents, phones, even behavior. Don't be fooled." Selena turned her gaze directly on Vivian. Her words came out steady, quiet, but carried a weight that stilled the cabin. "Ignorance is not a shield. What you did cannot be undone by denial." Amaya Torres's phone trembled in her hands as she whispered to her audience. "She just said it again. She knows the law. Guys, this is building to something big. I can feel it." The viewer count ticked past 600,000. Marla tried to reassert control. "Officers, enough waiting. Remove her now. We have a flight to board." But Captain Cole shook his head. "Not yet. Something isn't right here." His tone left no room for argument. He looked back at Selena. "Ma'am, you say you'll present identification at the appropriate time. When is that?" Selena drew in a slow breath. "When the truth has ripened enough to be undeniable." Passengers murmured. Darius Ung leaned forward from his seat, eyes sharp. "That sounds like the words of someone in command, not someone hiding." Vivian snapped at him. "Stay out of this." But Darius wouldn't be silenced. "No, I won't. I watched her passport burn. I saw the federal seal. That was no fake. What I'm seeing now is arrogance covering fear." His eyes locked on Vivian, and for a moment her mouth opened without words. Selena felt the tide shifting. She adjusted her bag slowly. The chain glinted again, catching the overhead lights. The gas from a few nearby passengers spread like a ripple through the cabin. Someone whispered too loudly, "It's a badge. She has a badge." Vivian moved quickly, trying to get ahead of it. "That's just a trinket. Criminals love shiny props. Don't fall for it." But even her voice lacked conviction now. Officer Zhao stepped closer. Her voice was calm but firm. "Ma'am, may I see the badge?" Selena studied her carefully. This officer had not rushed to judgment. Her eyes carried curiosity rather than condemnation. Selina inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. Then, very deliberately, she reached into her bag. Every phone camera zoomed in. Amaya's live stream shook slightly as her hands trembled with adrenaline. The chat screamed in capital letters, "This is it! This is it!" Selina withdrew the black leather wallet and set it gently on her lap. She let it rest there, unopened, for a long beat. The gold eagle insignia pressed into the leather caught the light, gleaming unmistakably official. She did not open it yet. The anticipation was its own kind of evidence. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Even the hum of the engines seemed muted. Vivian's breathing grew ragged, the bravado draining from her face. Marla's hands fidgeted against her skirt. Captain Cole leaned in, eyes fixed on the wallet. Selina finally spoke. "For the record," she said quietly, "I did not ask for this stage, but you created it, and now you will answer to the truth you tried to bury in fire." Her fingers flipped the wallet open with a practiced motion. The badge gleamed under the overhead lights, holographic seals shimmering across its surface. The words were clear, indisputable. Federal Aviation Administration, Chief Inspector, Criminal Enforcement Division. The effect was electric. Gasps erupted. A man in the back swore aloud. Phones caught every angle of the reveal, beams of reflected light bouncing off the metal eagle. Vivian froze, her lips parted, eyes wide. Marla Jensen stumbled a step back, her face draining of color. Officer Holt's notepad slipped from his hand onto the carpet. Officer Zhao's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with sudden respect. Captain Cole exhaled slowly, his voice steady but heavy. "Chief Inspector Ward." The title rolled off his tongue like a verdict. Selina nodded once. "Correct." Amaya's phone nearly slipped from her hands. "Oh my God. She's FA. She's actually FA," she whispered to her audience, who erupted in comments that flooded so fast her screen couldn't keep up. Vivian tried to recover, her voice cracking. That can't be real. She's faking it. Anyone can buy a badge." Selina's eyes cut through her. "Would you like to verify it against the federal law enforcement database?" "My commission number is available for immediate cross-check." Holt straightened, his training kicking in. He had no doubt anymore. No need. "That badge is genuine. I've seen enough to know." Zhao nodded firmly. "Same here. Chief Inspector, I deeply apologize for the treatment you've endured." Selina closed the wallet and placed it deliberately on the armrest. "You followed what you were told, but her gaze locked on Vivian. You chose arrogance over procedure. You chose hatred over law. And you will answer for it." Vivian's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. She stumbled back into her jump seat, trembling now. Selina's phone rang again, the federal tone echoing through the cabin like a bell of reckoning. This time she answered, pressing the device to her ear. "Ward here?" "Yes." "Identification revealed. Full incident recorded. Witnesses present. Approximately 200 passengers. 600,000 remote viewers. Chain of custody intact. Understood. Federal response team en route." She ended the call, her movements precise, her face calm. Then she looked around the cabin, at the sea of watching eyes, at the camera still recording. "Justice," she said softly, "has a way of burning brighter than hate." The words settled like a weight across the air, undeniable and irreversible. The boarding clock ticked down 14 minutes remaining. The cabin seemed to pulse with a strange, collective heartbeat. The reveal of Selina Ward's badge had shifted the air. Passengers who had once whispered skepticism now leaned forward, their phones held like lanterns, capturing a reckoning in real time. Selina placed her badge wallet neatly on the tray table in front of her, the gold eagle catching the light with every subtle movement of the plane. She sat upright, calm as a stone in a storm. Inside, her pulse thudded, but she controlled her breathing. Years of training taught her that composure was not only armor, but a weapon. Captain Ethan Cole rubbed the back of his neck, realizing the enormity of what had just unfolded under his command. He turned sharply toward Vivian Cross, who sat rigid in her jump seat, her hands trembling against her knees. "What exactly have you done?" His voice carried a controlled anger, the tone of a man who had just discovered his crew had endangered the very integrity of his flight. Vivian stammered. I thought... You thought Cole cut her off." His voice steel. "You destroyed a passenger's identity documents and mocked her in front of the entire cabin. And that passenger happens to be a federal inspector." The murmur from the passengers swelled into audible outrage. Dariusung shook his head, muttering to himself, but loud enough for phones to catch. "She's finished. Absolutely finished." Selina did not gloat. She simply reached into her bag, withdrew a small evidence pouch, and began collecting the burned fragments that Vivian had discarded so casually. She did it methodically, as if every shard of ash was another nail in the coffin of ignorance. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down, answered with quiet precision. "Ward, yes. Confirmed. Credentials revealed. Circumstances stable. Awaiting federal team." As she ended the call, the intercom crackled above. "Attention. This is your captain speaking. We are experiencing an operational delay. Please remain seated. Further instructions will follow shortly." His voice sounded strained, carrying both authority and guilt. Then it happened. The forward cabin door swung open. Heavy boots thudded on the entryway carpet. The air shifted with the unmistakable energy of enforcement. 4 federal marshals stepped in, black uniforms crisp, badges glinting, belts weighted with authority. At their lead was Deputy Marshal Rebecca Quinn, tall, sharp-eyed, her stride cutting through the narrow aisle like a blade. The entire cabin fell into reverent silence. Even the phones lowered slightly, not from disinterest, but from awe. Authority had arrived. Quinn stopped at the first-class row where Selina sat. She inclined her head respectfully. "Chief Inspector Ward." Selina returned the nod. "Marshal Quinn, thank you for your prompt response." Passengers gasped softly. The acknowledgement between them confirmed everything. This was no performance, no act. This was real, and now undeniable. Vivian Cross shifted in her seat. Her face drained of blood. Her hands fluttered like trapped birds. I didn't know. I thought it was fake." Quinn turned slowly, her gaze locking on Vivian. Her voice was calm, almost cold. "Your ignorance is not a defense. You will remain seated until instructed otherwise." Marla Jensen tried to interject, her voice faltering. "Deputy Marshal, perhaps we can sort this out quietly. There's been a misunderstanding." Quinn didn't even turn to face her. "Sit down." "Supervisor, you are not in charge here." The marshals fanned out with practiced precision. One secured the smoldering waste bag that still carried fragments of the burned passport. Another positioned near the cockpit door, ensuring no interference. The third began speaking into a radio clipped to his vest, coordinating with Federal Command outside. Selina spoke, her voice level and professional. "Evidence must be preserved. Fragments of the passport contain watermarks and seals. Chain of custody begins now. Quinn nodded, understood. She gestured, and one marshal extended an evidence kit. Selina placed the fragments carefully inside, sealing them with an official sticker. The camera phone zoomed in, capturing the act that elevated this beyond humiliation. This was prosecution, live and in color. Vivian finally broke. Her words spilled in desperation. I thought she was lying. Her documents didn't look right. And I've seen fakes before. I was protecting the flight. Selina turned to her, her eyes steady, unflinching. You were protecting your prejudice, not this flight. You burned my identity because you couldn't accept that someone like me belonged in this seat. The weight of her words pressed down on every soul in the cabin. Some passengers wept quietly. Others lowered their eyes in shame. But most kept filming, understanding that history was unfolding inches away from them. Quinn stepped closer to Vivian. Vivian Cross, you are hereby detained under federal authority for destruction of government property, obstruction of a federal investigation, and interference with a federal officer. Gas spread through the cabin. Vivian shook her head violently. No, no, no. I didn't mean I can't. Her voice cracked into sobs. The marshals moved with quiet efficiency, binding her wrists. The sight was devastating. The woman who had sneered with superiority minutes before, now reduced to a trembling figure in restraints. Selina felt no satisfaction in the sight, only a deep, steady ache. She had seen this cycle before, arrogance curdling into collapse. Still, she knew justice required accountability. Passengers whispered. Amaya Torres angled her phone toward herself, whispering to her audience of nearly 800,000. She's under arrest. Oh my God, they're actually arresting her. You're watching justice live, right here. Darius Ung shook his head, awe in his voice. I've done business around the world, but I've never seen anything like this. This is bigger than one flight. This is systemic. Selina straightened, standing for the first time since the ordeal began. She faced the cabin, her badge visible on her chest now. Her voice carried not just to the passengers, but to the millions who would watch the video soon. This is not about me alone. This is about every traveler who has been treated as less than human because of how they look, how they sound, or where they come from. What happened here is not an isolated mistake. It is part of a pattern, and it ends today. The words hung heavy in the air, sinking into the hearts of everyone listening. Quinn placed a steady hand on Selina's shoulder. We'll take it from here. Chief Inspector. Selina nodded, though her eyes remained on the passengers. She wanted them to remember her calm, her resolve, not the humiliation. She wanted them to carry it with them, to tell the story beyond this cabin. The marshals began escorting Vivian down the aisle. Phones followed her every step, recording her hunched posture, her tear-streaked face. A passenger muttered bitterly. She had power for an hour, and she burned it all in one match. Outside, the jet bridge filled with more agents, waiting. The boarding clock now read 10 minutes remaining, though the flight would never leave on time. Selina gathered her belongings slowly. She picked up a charred fragment of her passport photo that had fallen onto the carpet. Half her face was gone, replaced by blackened ash. She slid it into the evidence pouch with quiet care. Her voice, low but steady, broke the silence one last time. The ashes of a passport will not erase a lifetime of truth. The passengers erupted into quiet applause, not loud, not celebratory, but reverent. It was the sound of people acknowledging the gravity of what they had witnessed. Amaya ended her live stream with a final statement, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just a flight delay. This is history, and we're all witnesses." Selina sat back down, eyes closed for a moment, centering herself. She knew this was only the beginning. The real storm, the investigations, the lawsuits, the reforms was still ahead. But for now, the tide had turned. The hunter was in chains. The victim had become the enforcer, and justice was in motion. The hum of the aircraft had quieted into a low, tense vibration. Passengers barely moved, their eyes fixed on the front of the cabin where Vivian Cross had been led away in restraints. Phones still glowed like constellations across the dimmed cabin, their lenses drinking in every second. Selina Ward remained seated, her badge still visible, her posture calm yet unyielding. Every so often, she glanced at her phone, reading incoming alerts half from her own agency, half from the outside world, where hashtags were beginning to spiral into millions of impressions. The cabin door opened again, and a man in a tailored navy suit stepped inside. His presence was unmistakably corporate, the measured stride, the polished shoes, the jaw tightened into control. He was Jonathan Hale, Senior Vice President of Operations, the kind of man who had built a career smoothing crises before they reached the boardroom. But tonight, the boardroom had come crashing into Row 2A. Hale surveyed the scene, uniformed marshals, passengers filming, the faint acrid smell of burned paper still lingering in the recirculated air. His throat tightened. This wasn't a problem to be swept under a rug. This was a 5-alarm inferno. "Good evening, everyone," Hale began, projecting authority. "My name is Jonathan Hale. I represent the Airlines Operations Division. I want to assure you that the incident you witnessed is being taken very seriously." His words were calm, rehearsed, but they landed flat. The passengers weren't in the mood for polished statements. They had seen humiliation, fire, and federal credentials revealed. No speech could erase those images. Darius Ung leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms, his voice loud enough to carry. "Save it for CNN. Jonathan, we've all got the footage already." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the cabin. Hale's jaw twitched, but he pressed forward. "We regret what occurred. Our priority is your safety and ensuring this flight continues smoothly." Selina stood then, rising with a presence that instantly silenced the cabin. She faced Hale directly, her voice even but cutting. "Your employee destroyed federal identification during an active investigation. Your flight will not continue smoothly until accountability is established." Hale swallowed, forcing a smile that strained at the edges. "Inspector Ward, we are of course cooperating, but perhaps if we could handle this with discretion." Selina cut him off, her tone crisp. "Discretion. 500,000 people are watching live feeds right now. You don't have discretion anymore. You have evidence, you have liability, and you have a federal investigation unfolding in real time." Gas fluttered across the cabin. Hale's composure wavered. His eyes darted to the phones, then to the marshals, then back to Selina. He was a man used to controlling narratives, but here, the narrative had already escaped. Amaya Torres. Her phone raised steadily, whispered into her stream. He's trying to spin it, but she's not letting him. Hale tried again, lowering his voice, as though softer tones might regain control. "Chief Inspector, if you'd allow us to remove you to a private area, we could." Selina didn't flinch. "No. Every passenger here is a witness. Every phone is an archive. Transparency is the only path forward. If you want cooperation, it begins with acknowledgement, not concealment." Passengers nodded, murmuring agreement. Some clapped softly, not in celebration, but in solidarity. Hale's face flushed under the cabin lights. Captain Ethan Cole stepped forward, his expression weary. "Mr. Hale, with respect, I believe Inspector Ward is right. We can't treat this like a contained issue. The evidence is everywhere. We need to follow federal protocol." Hale glared at him, the brief flash of corporate irritation captain overstepping authority. But Cole stood firm. He knew his role wasn't to save reputations. It was to protect lives and uphold the law. Selina reached for her tablet, pulling up federal codes with smooth efficiency. Her voice carried like a lecture, deliberate and undeniable. Under Title 49, United States Code, Section 46503, interference with screening or destruction of documents related to passenger identity constitutes a federal crime. Under Section 44709, certificate holders, your airline are subject to immediate review when employees commit such acts. Do you understand what that means, Mr. Hale? Hale's face stiffened. He understood all too well. Certificate review meant grounding, oversight, fines millions bleeding out every day the fleet sat idle. Selina continued, "This isn't just about one gate agent. This is about the systemic tolerance that allowed her behavior to persist. Complaints ignored, bias unchecked. Tonight, your system failed under the weight of its own indifference." Her words landed heavy, undeniable. A passenger in row 4 muttered loudly, "Amen." Another said, "Finally, someone saying it." Hale exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. The mask of control was cracking. What do you want from us right now?" Selina met his gaze, unblinking. "Preserve the evidence, protect the witnesses, and prepare your executives for immediate federal oversight. You don't negotiate with me tonight. Mr. Hale, you answer to the law." The marshals shifted behind her, their presence reinforcing her authority. Hale glanced at them, then back at Selina. He knew he was cornered. Still, instinct pushed him to salvage something. "We'll fire Vivian immediately. Issue an apology. Launch retraining. Would that satisfy the Department of Transportation?" Selina shook her head slowly. "This isn't about firing one woman. You can't scapegoat her and walk away. The problem is not a person, it's a culture. And cultures only change when consequences reach the top." Phones caught every word, magnifying the confrontation to the digital world beyond the fuselage. Amaya's comments section exploded. "She's holding him accountable. This is history." For a brief moment, Hale's mask slipped entirely. He looked tired, beaten, like a man realizing his empire was already collapsing on the screen of a teenager's phone. Selina softened her voice slightly, but the edge remained. "Do you know what I felt when my passport was burning in her hands? Not fear, not even anger. What I felt was recognition. Recognition that this is how countless others have been treated without cameras, without badges, without recourse. Tonight isn't about me, it's about them." The cabin went silent. Hale's lips parted, but no words came. He had been stripped of his corporate rhetoric, reduced to the truth of failure. Selina turned toward the passengers then, her voice rising so all could hear. "You've all witnessed what happens when prejudice masquerades as protocol. Let your videos show the truth. Let your voices demand accountability. Because tonight, no one can say they didn't know." The applause began in pockets, hesitant, then swelled until the cabin filled with the sound of people clapping not for spectacle, but for truth spoken aloud. Hale stood frozen, his suit immaculate, but his authority shattered. Selina sat back down slowly, her tablet still glowing with statutes, her badge gleaming on her chest. She whispered almost to herself, but loud enough for the nearest microphones to catch. "Justice doesn't happen behind closed doors. It happens in the open, where everyone can see. And with that, the corporate reckoning had begun. The cabin lights seemed sharper now, every detail exaggerated by the stillness that followed Selina Ward's words. Passengers shifted in their seats, whispering, phones still lifted like lanterns. The low mechanical hum of the aircraft provided the only steady rhythm as the marshals stepped forward. Vivian Cross sat hunched in the jump seat near the forward galley, her wrists bound in metal cuffs, eyes wide with disbelief. Just an hour earlier, she had barked orders with the authority of uniform and seniority. Now, the same passengers who once obeyed her looked on with curiosity and condemnation. Deputy Marshal Rebecca Quinn bent slightly, speaking in a voice both firm and measured. "Ms. Cross, you are under arrest for destruction of federal property, obstruction of an active investigation, and interfering with a federal law enforcement officer." She read the right slowly, each syllable crisp. Vivian's breathing grew shallow. Her lips parted, forming words that faltered. "I didn't know. I thought. It looked fake." Her voice cracked, a plea against the inevitability of law. But the marshals didn't pause. The clink of restraints echoed softly as Rebecca tightened them, ensuring no escape. Selina watched, her expression neutral, her posture a portrait of calm resolve. Inside, though, her thoughts turned. Was this justice, or merely the beginning? Would Vivian's arrest become a scapegoat story for an industry unwilling to confront its deeper flaws? Selina knew this moment would define not only Vivian's future, but also how far the airline would go to accept responsibility. Jonathan Hale shifted uncomfortably. His tie loosened now, sweat gathering at his hairline. He leaned toward Selina, whispering, "Do we have to make this so? Public cameras everywhere? This isn't the image we want." Selina turned to him slowly, her eyes steady. "The image was already made when your employee set fire to my passport. This is the consequence." Rebecca guided Vivian to her feet. The flight attendant wobbled slightly, her knees weak. The cabin grew hushed. The sound of her footsteps, escorted down the aisle, was magnified by silence and the relentless presence of recording devices. Amaya Torres tilted her phone, catching every angle, her live audience flooding the comments section with disbelief, outrage, and validation. "She's being taken away right now," Amaya whispered into her stream, her voice trembling with the awareness of history unfolding. "You can feel the air in here. It's like everyone's holding their breath." Vivian's eyes darted toward the passengers, searching for someone to defend her, someone to say this was all a mistake. But the faces she met were not sympathetic. A woman in row 5 shook her head. A man in row 3 muttered, "About time." Only one elderly gentleman lowered his gaze, perhaps remembering that humiliation, even deserved, still weighed heavy on a human soul. As they reached the forward door, Vivian stopped abruptly, her voice rising, desperate. "You don't understand. I was doing my job. I was protecting this airline." The words hung in the air, brittle and sharp. Selina stood then, her voice calm, but resonant enough to carry. Protecting the airline does not mean destroying people's dignity. It does not mean committing crimes against passengers you are sworn to serve. Your job was never to protect the airline at the expense of humanity. The silence that followed swallowed Vivian's protest whole. The marshals nudged her gently forward, through the door, into the jet bridge, where flashing lights waited beyond the windows. A collective exhale swept through the cabin, a release of tension, but not of unease. The passengers were witnesses to justice, but also to the raw truth of how fragile justice could feel. Selina sank back into her seat, folding her hands in her lap. Her face was still, but her chest rose with the weight of reflection. She could feel the eyes on her, the unspoken gratitude of some, the wary curiosity of others. A young mother in row 6 caught her gaze and mouthed, "Thank you." Inside, however, Selina wrestled with the paradox. She knew Vivian Cross would not be the last. For every incident captured on video, countless others passed unseen, unnoticed, dismissed. She thought of the quiet faces she had met in her career, travelers who had endured humiliation with no audience, no live stream, no marshal to set the record straight. Those memories pressed against her like ghosts in the pressurized cabin. Jonathan Hale broke the silence, his voice lower now, stripped of the polish. This is catastrophic. By tomorrow morning, the headlines will bury us. Our stock, our credibility, everything. Darius Ung leaned in, his voice cutting, unapologetic. What's catastrophic is that it took a federal agent being humiliated before you saw it as a problem. What about everyone else who didn't have a badge? What about them? Hale winced, as though the words themselves carried weight. He had no reply. Captain Ethan Cole stepped closer, addressing Selina directly. "Chief Inspector, what happens next? Are we cleared to operate this flight?" Selina lifted her chin, her tone authoritative yet measured. "No. This aircraft is part of a federal investigation now. All evidence must be preserved. All witness statements recorded. This plane is not going anywhere tonight." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Some passengers groaned at the inconvenience. Others nodded in understanding. For most, the drama had shifted from outrage to acceptance. They were part of something larger now. Something far beyond a delayed departure. Selina's phone buzzed again, the distinctive tone of her agency's secure line. She answered quietly. Her words clipped. "Yes. Inspector Ward. Arrest confirmed. Evidence preserved. Passenger statements forthcoming. Understood." She ended the call, her gaze sweeping the cabin once more. The weight of leadership pressed against her ribs. She carried not just her authority, but the responsibility of every person who had ever been disregarded. In her stillness, she was not detached. She was deliberate. Rebecca Quinn returned briefly to update her. Cross is in custody, transporting her now. Federal prosecutors have been notified. Chicago field office is preparing charges. Selina nodded. "Thank you." As Rebecca left again, Selina turned her eyes to the window. Outside, flashing lights from emergency vehicles painted the tarmac red and blue. She thought of her own passport, reduced to ash, the pages that had once held stamps of her work, her life, her travels gone. Yet the ashes had become something greater. Evidence, catalyst, a story too visible to be ignored. Passengers slowly began to speak again, quieter now, more reflective. A woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, "I've never seen anything like this." A college student muttered, "This is history." "I was here," Amaya whispered into her phone, her voice hushed with awe. She carries herself like she was waiting for this moment, like she knew it would come." Selina closed her eyes briefly. A private moment of honesty with herself. Did she know, not this exact moment, but she had always known that discrimination would rear its head, again and again, until someone forced it into the light. Tonight, it had chosen her as the vessel, and she had chosen not to break. The cabin air felt heavy after Vivian Cross was escorted away. Passengers whispered in clusters, voices carrying both shock and fascination. Selina Ward remained seated near the front, her posture straight, her presence grounding the chaos around her. Yet beneath her calm surface, thoughts collided. The arrest had been necessary, but it was only one thread in a much larger fabric. Jonathan Hale stood near the galley, his phone glued to his hand, his face illuminated by the glow of incoming messages. Each vibration seemed to pull another layer of color from his skin. He finally tucked the phone into his pocket and approached Selina with the weariness of a man walking into a storm. "Chief Inspector Ward," he began, his tone polished but fraying at the edges. "We need to discuss next steps. The longer this plays out in public, the harder it will be to contain." If we could find a private space to settle, Selina's eyes fixed on him, calm and unwavering. There is no private space when an employee commits a federal crime in front of 200 witnesses and 500,000 viewers online. Containment is no longer possible. Transparency is your only option. The words landed like a verdict. Hale exhaled, shoulders sagging. He looked around, catching the gaze of passengers who were still recording. Every angle, every word, captured in high definition. Darius Ung leaned forward from his seat, speaking loud enough for both Hale and the rest of the cabin to hear. "Containment. That's what you care about. Not what happened to her. Not the fact your crew humiliated a passenger who turned out to be a federal inspector. You're worried about optics." Hale stiffened, trying to regain composure. "I assure you, sir, the airline takes this very seriously." Darius laughed bitterly. "You didn't take it seriously until you saw badges and handcuffs." The tension stretched, thick and brittle. Amaya Torres, still streaming, added her quiet commentary into the phone camera. "You can see it right here. He doesn't know what to say. They're scrambling. They're more scared of losing stock value than of losing people's dignity." Selina closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. She knew this wasn't just about Vivian Cross anymore. This was about an institution that had allowed patterns of behavior to thrive unchecked. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Hale. "Mr. Hale, I will need access to all personnel records related to Ms. Cross, including any prior complaints. I will also require reports on disciplinary actions taken or ignored." Hale blinked. "Here. Now, yes. My investigation begins immediately. This aircraft is now part of a federal crime scene. Every passenger, every crew member, every record will be part of the file." The captain, Ethan Cole, stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Chief Inspector, does that mean this flight is officially canceled?" Selina met his gaze. "Yes. Passenger safety extends beyond mechanical systems. Trust has been violated here. Until this investigation is complete, this plane will not leave the ground." A groan rippled through the cabin, but no one dared openly protest. The spectacle had taken on a gravity that made ordinary complaints about delay feel petty. Hale rubbed his temples. "Chief Inspector, with all due respect, grounding this flight creates a massive logistical nightmare. Hundreds of passengers will need rebooking, hotel vouchers, meals, and the financial liability?" Selina's voice cut through his sentence, cool and precise. "The liability began when your employee set fire to my passport." Her words were not loud, but the silence that followed magnified them. Passengers shifted, watching Hale's reaction. Some nodded, murmuring agreement. Others simply stared, recording. Hale adjusted his tie again, though it no longer sat straight. "We will cooperate fully," he said finally, but the words sounded rehearsed, insufficient. Selina leaned back, allowing her silence to do what words could not. Inside her, though, unease stirred. She knew Hale's cooperation would come only under the weight of federal enforcement. And she knew that enforcement alone could not erase the humiliation she had endured, or the casual cruelty so many travelers face daily. She thought of her father's stories, of doors closed, of eyes averted, of voices dismissed. She thought of her own journey, rising into authority while carrying scars invisible to most. The irony was bitter. She had built her life around protecting passengers from injustice, only to become its target in plain view. The overhead speakers crackled, breaking the quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Cole announced, his voice measured, "this flight is officially delayed pending federal investigation. Please remain seated until further instructions are provided." The message confirmed what passengers already knew. Some sighed, others nodded. Amaya whispered into her phone, "There it is. They can't sweep this under the rug now." Rebecca Quinn returned briefly, her presence sharp and steady. "Cross is secured in a holding cell. Federal prosecutors are on standby. Media's already outside. You'll be hearing from Washington within the hour." Selina nodded, though her stomach tightened at the thought. She imagined the headlines already scrolling across screens. Gate agent burns passenger's passport. Passenger revealed as federal inspector. Airline under investigation. Her phone buzzed again, the secure line lighting up. She answered, listening quietly, her face unreadable. Understood. Yes. Evidence is intact. Live streams are being archived. I'll coordinate with the local field office. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. Jonathan Hale was watching her closely now, as though trying to gauge just how far her reach extended. "Chief Inspector," he said carefully, "is there any way to negotiate terms before this escalates further? Perhaps an internal review, a private settlement." The passengers erupted with laughter and outrage. One man shouted, "Private settlement!" "We all saw it happen," a woman added. "You can't cover this up." Selina held up her hand, quieting the noise. She looked at Hale with a steady calm that seemed to strip away his defenses. "This has already escalated. You are no longer negotiating with me. You are negotiating with federal law." Hale swallowed, his face pale. Selina turned to the passengers, addressing them now. "Each of you is a witness. Your recordings, your statements, your presence will be vital. What happened here is not an isolated incident. It is part of a larger pattern, and your courage in documenting it matters." Amaya's phone caught her words perfectly. The live comments surged with support, hearts and fire emojis flooding the stream. Viewers were calling her a hero, a force, a voice. Selina, however, did not feel heroic. She felt tired of proving what should already be clear, tired of fighting for dignity that should never have been questioned. But within that fatigue burned resolve. If she had to become the face of this battle, she would not shy away. The cabin settled again, the hum of the engine stilling into background noise. Outside, flashing lights continued to paint the night in harsh red and blue. Inside, the balance of power had shifted entirely. Selina sat back, closing her eyes for a brief moment. No, she thought of the ashes of her passport, of the years of travel history erased in flame, and of the new chapter those ashes would ignite. Justice was not yet complete, but it had begun. The cabin of the aircraft felt like a stage, every passenger an actor and every camera lens a spotlight. Selina Ward could sense the shifting energy, the way whispers had turned into conversations, and conversations into collective judgment. The weight of truth pressed on everyone. Vivian Cross might have been led away, but the shadow of what she had done lingered like smoke in the air vents. Jonathan Hale remained near the forward galley, his phone buzzing relentlessly. Each new notification added tension to his jawline, but he tried to maintain his practiced corporate demeanor. He had been through crises before, though none as raw, none as unspinnable as this. Selina watched him, her mind quietly dissecting his movements. Every glance toward the passengers, every subtle tug of his tie, revealed desperation. She thought of the countless reports she had read on systemic bias, the names and faces of travelers who had been silenced or dismissed. Their stories now stood behind her, amplified by live cameras and hundreds of witnesses. Hale finally moved closer, lowering his voice, though he knew everything would be overheard. "Chief Inspector, the board is already on a call. Our CEO wants to speak with you directly. If you'd prefer, we can arrange a secure line in the jet bridge." Selina's gaze was steady. "You misunderstand. Mr. Hale, this is not a negotiation. I am not here to broker optics for your board. I am here to conduct a federal investigation, and that investigation is happening in full view of the public, because that is where the crime occurred." A ripple of approval moved through the cabin. Passengers leaned closer, nodding. Phones rose higher, recording every syllable. Darius Ung shifted in his seat, his voice cutting through with measured authority. "She is right. We have lived through decades of apologies and settlements. None of them mean anything without accountability." Amaya Torres, still live streaming, panned her camera between Hale and Selina. Her voice was quiet but carried weight. "You're watching history happen. They want to hide. She refuses to let them." The captain, Ethan Cole, stood at the threshold of the cockpit, his face taut with conflict. His loyalty was torn between corporate hierarchy and his respect for law. "Chief Inspector, the tower keeps asking for an update. What should I tell them?" Selina rose slowly, her presence commanding without force. "Tell them this aircraft is grounded as part of a federal investigation. Tell them justice takes precedence over schedules." Cole gave a sharp nod, retreating into the cockpit. Hale muttered something under his breath, but the microphones of a dozen phones caught it. The live comments on Amaya's feed flared instantly. He was trending without even realizing it. Selina turned to face the passengers fully. Her voice carried calm authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are not merely bystanders. You are witnesses to a federal crime. Your documentation will help ensure accountability. I thank you for your patience, and I ask for your continued vigilance. History has shown that silence allows injustice to survive. Tonight, you are not silent." The applause started softly, then swelled until the cabin vibrated with clapping hands and affirming voices. Hale stood frozen, unable to stop the tide. Inside, Selina felt the pang of vulnerability. She had spoken boldly, but she knew the weight that would follow. Media storms could elevate or destroy careers. She wondered if she would be remembered as the agent who sparked reform or the one who broke an industry. Doubt flickered, then hardened into resolve. She reminded herself that truth, once revealed, could not be undone. Rebecca Quinn returned, her marshal's badge gleaming under the cabin lights. She leaned close to Selina. "Prosecutor's office just confirmed. Charges are being drafted against Cross, but they also want statements from senior management, starting with Hale." Selina nodded. "He is right here." Rebecca turned her attention to Hale, her voice crisp. "Sir, you'll need to remain available for federal questioning. Please do not leave this aircraft." Hale's composure cracked, the thin veneer of confidence shattering into frustration. "Do you have any idea what this means for us? For our company? Our market value is evaporating by the second. We could lose hundreds of millions before the opening bell." Selina answered quietly. every word deliberate. Perhaps you should have considered the value of dignity before letting it burn in the hands of your employee. The passengers erupted again, some cheering, some crying out in agreement. The cameras caught every angle. The world outside was already reacting. Hashtags multiplying, headlines forming in real time. Hale sank into an empty jump seat, burying his face in his hands. For a brief moment, the executive mask fell away, leaving only a man realizing the empire he served was cracking beneath him. Selina sat again, her heart steady though her hands ached from tension. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to take in the faces around her. She saw solidarity, outrage, and something else too, hope. It flickered like a fragile flame, but it was real. She thought of her mother's words, spoken years ago. Dignity is not given. It is claimed, again and again, even when they try to take it. Tonight, those words felt like prophecy fulfilled. The intercom chimed. Attention passengers. A flight attendant, not involved in the incident, spoke shakily. Please remain calm. We will begin deplaning shortly at the instruction of federal authorities. Thank you for your cooperation. The announcement signaled a shift. The passengers began gathering their belongings, though none stopped recording. They wanted proof until the very end. Selina stood once more, her posture unshaken. Remember what you witnessed here, she told them. The struggle for justice is not measured by one incident, but by the changes that follow. Do not let this be forgotten. As passengers filed out, some stopped to thank her. Others touched her arm lightly in solidarity. Amaya lingered, her phone still streaming. Chief Inspector, people want to know what happens next. Can I keep following this? Selina studied the young woman's earnest face, her courage. Yes, the truth must keep moving. Just make sure you tell it whole. Amaya nodded, her feed capturing one last close-up before she turned the camera back to herself. You heard her? This isn't over. Rebecca guided Hale toward the exit, her presence a reminder that the wheels of justice were turning. Hale looked back once, his eyes filled with fear and calculation. He knew his world was changing, and not in ways he could control. Selina remained seated, the cabin emptying around her. She reached for her bag, her fingers brushing the edge of the badge chain. The weight of her authority was both burden and shield. She whispered to herself, almost inaudible, "This is what it costs. This is what it takes." When the last passenger had left, the silence returned, heavy and profound. The aircraft, once a vessel for travel, had become a courtroom, a battlefield, a place where truth had been set alight and could no longer be hidden. Selina stood slowly, walking toward the exit where federal agents waited. Each step carried both exhaustion and purpose. She knew the night was far from over. The confrontation inside the cabin was only the beginning. Outside, the world was waiting, and she would meet it head-on. The jet bridge was lined with uniforms, cameras, and silence that carried its own thunder. As Selina Ward stepped from the aircraft, the air changed. Gone was the recycled hum of the cabin. Here, every sound was sharp. The shuffle of reporters adjusting their microphones, the clicking of camera shutters, the static from radios. Jonathan Hale followed, flanked by Deputy Marshal Rebecca Quinn. His complexion was gray, his tie loosened, his confidence long gone. A man who had once walked boardrooms with a sense of invincibility now looked like prey under the unblinking lights of justice. Selina paused just outside the cabin door, letting her eyes adjust to the intensity. The crowd of journalists pressed forward, their questions volleyed like stones. Chief Inspector, Is it true a federal document was destroyed on board? Was this racially motivated? Will the airline lose its operating certificate? Rebecca raised her hand. Please step back. Federal investigation underway. Her voice was firm, but even she could not control the tide. Selina raised her palm gently. The movement was small, but the crowd fell quiet. There was something about her poise, the way her shoulders squared, the way she looked directly at the lenses as if speaking to each viewer personally. Yes, she said, her voice clear. A federal crime occurred on that aircraft. It was witnessed by hundreds in person and by millions online. Evidence is secured. Justice will proceed in full accordance with federal law. The silence shattered into a storm of shouted questions. Selina did not flinch. She let the noise wash over her, then spoke again, softer but no less commanding. The crime was not just the destruction of a passport. It was the destruction of dignity, and that, too, carries consequences. The word spread instantly, transmitted across feeds and broadcasts. Screens across the country displayed her face, her voice, her message. Viewers in living rooms and airport lounges stopped mid-sentence to listen. Hale shifted uncomfortably. A few cameras pivoted to him, capturing the beads of sweat forming at his temple. He muttered something about cooperation, but it was drowned by the crowd's attention on Selina. From the corner of her eye, Selina noticed Amaya Torres still streaming. Her phone held steady as if it were an extension of her arm. Darius Ung stood behind her, his expression solemn, protective almost, as though he had become a guardian of truth simply by refusing to look away. The airline's CEO arrived then, tall, silver-haired, wearing a tailored suit that looked more armor than fabric. Richard Fallon moved with the force of a man used to command. His entourage of lawyers and public relations officers fanned behind him like shadows. He extended his hand toward Selina, a gesture meant for the cameras. She did not take it. Instead, she held his gaze, and the cameras caught the refusal. Fallon hesitated, then dropped his hand, his smile brittle. Chief Inspector Ward, he began smoothly, on behalf of the company, allow me to extend our deepest apologies for this unfortunate misunderstanding. We are committed to cooperating fully. Selina's reply was quiet but piercing. What you call a misunderstanding is a felony. What you frame as unfortunate is systemic. Apologies are not compliance. Promises are not reform. Tonight is not about words. The journalists erupted again, scribbling furiously, recording every syllable. Fallon's expression faltered, the PR rehearsals slipping from his control. He tried to regroup, gesturing to his team. We are prepared to announce immediate actions, new training protocols, revised customer service standards. Selina cut him off, her tone sharp. Mr. Fallon, federal law is not optional, and dignity is not a marketing strategy. Your actions tonight will not be measured by press releases. They will be measured by compliance with federal mandates and the consequences of failure. Rebecca Quinn stepped forward, reading from her tablet. The United States Department of Justice and the Federal Aviation Administration have initiated joint proceedings. Effective immediately, certain employees of this airline are under federal detention. Senior leadership remains subject to questioning. Gas rippled through the crowd. Cameras swung from Fallon to Hale to Selina. Fallon's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. His empire was teetering, and he knew it. Selina inhaled slowly, steadying herself. She could feel the eyes of the nation on her, and beneath that weight lay the quieter burden of her own doubts. Was she ready for the storm her words would unleash? Could she withstand the backlash? Sure to come from industries threatened by accountability? Her mother's voice whispered again from memory. When they push you to the ground, rise taller than before. She straightened, her doubts replaced by the steel of purpose. A young boy in the crowd of passengers who had deplaned tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed towards Selena. Mom, is she a hero? The question carried, picked up by microphones, spreading across the feeds like a spark catching dry grass. Selena turned toward the child, her eyes softening. No, she said gently. I'm just someone doing her duty. The real heroes are those who refuse to stay silent when they see injustice. The words landed with the force of truth, unadorned and undeniable. Fallon's PR officer attempted to redirect. Chief Inspector, surely we can take this discussion away from the public eye. Selena interrupted once more, her calm now razor-sharp. This began in public. It will remain in public. The days of quiet settlements and hidden truths are over. The journalists cheered, some audibly, abandoning neutrality in the face of her conviction. Hashtags exploded across social media, trending phrases like Co's dignity in flight and Co ward against injustice. Rebecca signaled, and federal agents began escorting Hale and other airline managers toward waiting vehicles. Fallon remained, his lawyers whispering urgently in his ear. He looked at Selena one last time, and for the first time, the mask cracked fully. Fear showed in his eyes. Selena stepped past him, down the jet bridge, where more cameras waited at the terminal entrance. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, steady and resolute. Passengers parted to let her through, some reaching out to touch her arm, others simply bowing their heads in respect. She paused briefly at the memorial plaque already being placed by airport workers, a temporary marker for what had just occurred: equal treatment under law. She traced the words lightly with her fingers, then continued forward. Outside, the floodlights turned night into day. News anchors spoke into microphones, their voices urgent. Selena approached the podium hastily set up by federal staff. She stood behind it, the sea of cameras stretching endlessly ahead. This is bigger than one airline, she began, her voice carrying across the terminal. This is about who we are as a nation. Tonight we witnessed what happens when prejudice is allowed to masquerade as policy. But we also witnessed something else, the power of truth, amplified by every witness who refused to look away. She gestured toward the passengers, toward Amaya still holding her phone high, toward Darius standing quietly at her side. Change does not come from authority alone. It comes when ordinary people record, share, and demand better. It comes when silence ends. Her words were carried live across the country, broadcast into homes, offices, and phones. For some, they were a revelation. For others, a reckoning. Selena closed with the same measured calm that had carried her through the storm. Justice is not an act. It is a process, and that process has begun. The floodlights brightened, the applause thundered, and the world leaned closer to listen. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was an austere building, gray columns standing like sentinels against the wind. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, the solemn perfume of justice. Rows of benches filled quickly that morning. Reporters, activists, airline employees, and curious citizens all pressed in to witness the culmination of a story that had begun with fire at 30,000 feet. Selena Ward sat quietly at the government's table, her posture straight, her eyes steady. She wore no uniform, only a simple navy suit, but there was authority in the way she carried herself. On the table beside her lay a sealed evidence bag containing the charred fragments of her passport. The edges were blackened, the gold lettering half melted, but the remnants spoke louder than any opening statement ever could. Across the aisle, Vivian Cross sat in shackles, orange prison scrubs replacing the crisp flight attendant uniform she had once worn with pride. Her eyes darted around the courtroom, avoiding Selena's gaze, avoiding the cameras that waited hungrily to capture her downfall. Marla Jensen, the supervisor who had tried to cover for her, sat stiffly in the gallery, summoned as a witness, her lips pressed thin with dread. Judge Evelyn Harding entered, robes flowing, her gavel striking the block with a sound that silenced even the restless journalists. This court is now in session. United States versus Vivian Cross. The prosecutor rose. Assistant U.S. Attorney Daniel Kim, his voice even and deliberate. Your Honor, the government will show that the defendant deliberately destroyed federal identification belonging to a federal law enforcement officer engaged in an active investigation. We will show that her actions not only obstructed justice, but also endangered the very integrity of civil rights enforcement. And we will show that the airline's systemic negligence enabled this crime to occur in plain view of hundreds of passengers and millions of online witnesses. Vivian's defense attorney objected, insisting that his client had acted under stress, mistaking a legitimate passport for a counterfeit. The judge allowed the argument to proceed, but her tone was clipped. Selena was called first. She rose, walking to the witness stand with a calm step. Sworn in, she sat, folding her hands lightly in her lap. The courtroom held its breath. Chief Inspector Ward, Kim began, can you describe the events leading to the destruction of your passport? Selena's voice was steady, each word chosen with care. Vivian Cross took my passport from my hand, declared me unfit to travel, and set it on fire using a match. She ordered me to kneel to retrieve my boarding pass. She told bystanders I was fraudulent and treated me as less than human. All while I carried federal credentials she never once asked to verify. Gas whispered through the gallery. Selena continued, describing how live streams spread the crime across social media, how the ash from her passport had been preserved, how federal marshals had arrested Vivian mid-flight. The defense attorney attempted to rattle her. Ms. Ward, isn't it true that you could have prevented this by revealing your identity sooner? Selena's gaze did not waver. The investigation I was conducting required discretion. More importantly, my dignity did not require proof. A citizen does not owe proof of worth to avoid discrimination. The crime occurred the moment my rights were denied. Her words carried through the courtroom like a current, igniting nods of agreement, murmurs of support. Next came Amaya Torres. The young woman walked nervously to the stand, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. She testified about her live stream, how she had felt fear but also determination to record what she knew was wrong. The prosecutor displayed the video for the jury. Gas rose as Vivian's voice filled the courtroom. Pick it up on your knees. This ghetto trash doesn't deserve to fly. Vivian covered her face, tears sliding down her cheeks, but the evidence was undeniable. The jury saw the flame touch the passport, saw the cover curl, heard the laughter that followed. Darius Ung testified next, his words crisp, his credibility unassailable. A businessman who had no reason to lie. He spoke of watching an official document destroyed, of watching dignity reduced to ash. His testimony reinforced the truth that this was no misunderstanding. It was malice. When the airline CEO Richard Fallon was called, his arrogance from the airport had vanished. Under oath, faced with documents of repeated complaints against Vivian that had been ignored, He admitted corporate negligence. His words were clipped, almost whispered. Yes, we received complaints. Yes, they were dismissed. We should have acted sooner. The judge's gavel kept order. Murmurs filled the room again. Closing arguments arrived swiftly. The prosecutor reminded the jury that this case was about more than a burned passport. It was about whether America would allow prejudice to masquerade as security. Every passenger who boards an aircraft deserves dignity, Kim said. Every federal agent conducting oversight deserves protection. To destroy a passport is to destroy trust. To destroy it with prejudice is to destroy justice itself. The defense pleaded for leniency, painting Vivian as overwhelmed, misguided, even remorseful. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood, her voice firm. We find the defendant guilty on all counts. Vivian sobbed, collapsing into her chair. Selina closed her eyes briefly, exhaling a long breath. It was not joy she felt, but release. The weight of injustice lifted by the force of truth. Judge Harding delivered the sentence. Vivian Cross, for the crime of willful destruction of government property, obstruction of justice, and violation of civil rights. This court sentences you to 36 months in federal prison, followed by supervised probation. This is not merely a punishment for your actions, but a message to all who would abuse authority under the guise of service. The gavel struck, echoing finality. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Selina stood at the courthouse steps, flanked by federal officials. She spoke once more to the gathered press. This case was never just about me. It was about every traveler who has been told they do not belong, every passenger forced to prove their humanity before their identity. Tonight, the ashes of a passport became the seeds of reform. Her words rippled through the air, captured on every screen, replayed on every channel. The next week, the Aviation Civil Rights Enhancement Act was signed into law, mandating real-time bias monitoring across the airline industry. Airlines scrambled to implement the systems, spending millions to ensure compliance. Selina was appointed Director of Aviation Civil Rights Enforcement. In her new office in Washington, she placed the charred fragment of her passport into a frame on her desk, not as a symbol of loss, but as a reminder of transformation. Amaya, now a rising voice in civil rights, founded a network to train students in documenting injustice. Darius became an advisor to federal committees, helping shape reforms. Fallon's airline was forced into compliance, its stock price recovering only after embracing transparency and accountability. And Vivian Cross, after serving her sentence, would spend her later years speaking at community centers, teaching others how quickly bias can destroy a life. Selina often returned to the memory of the boy at the airport who had asked if she was a hero. She knew the truth. She was not a hero. She was a witness who refused to be silent, a woman who transformed ashes into accountability. On quiet evenings, she would hold the passport fragment and whisper the same words she had carried in her heart throughout the ordeal. Dignity is not a privilege. It is a right. The legacy was not hers alone. It belonged to every person who had held up a phone, who had refused to turn away, who had demanded better. The fire that had burned her passport had instead illuminated a path forward, not only for aviation, but for justice itself. The verdict of ashes had become the verdict of change, from humiliation to history. Selina Ward's journey reminds us that dignity is not something granted by uniforms or positions of power. It is a right that no flame can destroy. The ashes of her passport became a symbol, not of defeat, but of transformation. They forced an industry to change, pushed a nation to confront its biases, and showed the world what resilience looks like when prejudice tries to erase identity. Vivian Cross's cruelty was real, but so was her reckoning. And in that courtroom, the balance shifted. What was once an act of arrogance became the foundation for new laws, new protections, and a future where fewer travelers will face the same pain. So the question lingers for all of us when we see injustice unfolding in front of us. Will we look away, or will we record, speak up, and stand with the victims until truth prevails? Let Selena's story stay with you. Let it move you to empathy, to vigilance, and to courage, because every act of dignity defended is a step toward justice for us all. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join us for more stories that expose prejudice, celebrate resilience, and demand change. The next one might open your eyes even more.